crying. Brother, 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 there's far too many of you dying. You know we've gotta find a way to bring some living here today. So what's going on? What's going on? Let's talk about what's going on. What's going on? What's going on? All around us. What's going on? 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 Let's talk about what's going on. Hey, conversations with Daisy Jones. What's going on?
Hello and welcome to Conversations with Daisy Jones. I welcome you back if you've been listening to the show, and if this is your first time, I'm glad you've tuned in to just listen to the conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join the conversation. I know that you're going to enjoy it today, and so sit back and relax and be inspired, be empowered, learn something new, because today, on the show with me is Miss Rose Mullice. Many of you know Miss Rose Mullice's background, but she's going to tell you in just a minute about herself. And Mrs. Hermina Glass-Hill, she's going to tell you about herself as well. I'm so excited because once you really hear what we're going to talk about today, which is African American history, children's book. We're going to talk about all kinds of things. So stick around and listen to the conversation. So welcome, Miss Rose Mullice. Welcome to Conversations. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you. I am happy to be here. As you said, I am Rose Mullice. In our circle, we have the Cumias and the Binyas. So I introduce myself as Rose Mullice, a Binya. Left here, came back here, gonna stay here till I die here.
Oh, I love that.
Yes. Good morning. I have a desire and have always been inspired by the history of our people. If we don't know where we came from, how can we know where we're going? Someone once said, if you don't know your history, you keep making the same mistakes over and over again. So every time someone says, oh, let's try this new thing, there is nothing new under the sun.
Right. And Miss Rose, you I know you didn't share it, but you worked in social services for a very long time.
Yes, I retired as a social worker with the Department of the Army, but I had a lot of varied experience, which tells you that you can get on a path to going someplace, and then you will arrive there. I didn't start out as a social worker. I finished high school, dropped out of college, went back, did a lot of things in between. I worked as a telephone operator, I worked as a secretary, and then I ended up, when I got to into my 30s, to get a professional degree and work in a professional field. So it was always what I wanted to do. Took me a while to get there, a lot of detours, but I got there. So I hope that people are inspired by that, as long as you stay on the path. I tell folks, as long as a child can see the path, it's when you get too far and you lose sight of the path that you find yourself in trouble. But keep your eyes on the path.
That's right.
And walk it to the side, in the ditch, on the road, but keep going forward on the path.
Yes, well said. Well said. Well
Wonderful.
Said. Thank you.
Wonderful.
And welcome, Miss Hermina. Glad to have you as well.
I'm glad to be here.
And I met you at the Susie B. King Taylor storytelling earlier in this year, 2017.
That's right.
But welcome back. Tell us about, let everybody know who you are.
Well, as she stated, I'm Hermina Glass here, and I'm a Kamia from Atlanta. And I want to thank all of the community in Midway for welcoming me in such a beautiful and passionate and compassionate way. I came here on a vision that God gave me to find Susie King Taylor's family and to begin to tell the full story of Susie King Taylor, because I think as a professional historian, I was initially the associate director of the Center for the Study of the Civil War at Kennesaw State University, and I stumbled upon Susie's story in 2009, and it was in 2009 that I was really gravitating toward this story that's undertold. Susie King Taylor was born enslaved here in Liberty County in Midway on the Isle of Wight, and at an early age she was given an opportunity by her slave master to live with her grandmother in Savannah, and it is there that she attended 4 secret schools, which is unusual for an enslaved person to even get an education. She was taught by 2 African American free women of color, and then she was taught by 2 young white children who secretly taught her while their parents were busy doing other things. And it was in 1862 that she escaped when the Union forces were outside of Fort Pulaski, and they won the Battle of Fort Pulaski, and she seized the moment, seized that opportunity, she and several members of her family on Gress Island, Isle of Wight, and she escaped the bondages of slavery, never to look back.
Many times people are not aware of history as it unfolds where you live, because sometimes it's like over there that it happened in another state or overseas, but not in where you live at the time. I'm a come here myself, and so I'm always so excited and intrigued by the history that's here in Liberty County. And I was so happy to attend that session, that forum that you delivered earlier this year, hoping that there would be more of that type of forum, so people can become more educated and inspired by the story, by the real truth of things that happen. And Fort Pulaski is located right near Richmond Hill, correct?
Outside of Savannah.
Outside of Savannah.
Tybee Island, yes.
And so tell me about the Happy Birthday Susie book. It is beautifully illustrated.
Well, as I stated, this place was calling me from a very spiritual, existentialist kind of way. There is a difference between learning history, learning the concepts, and actually applying history. So what I have sought to do is to live history in a way that is applicable, that is accessible to the public in a very real way. When I came in February, when I met you first, that event, I got to my hotel room and I looked at my husband and I said, God is calling me to come back and to live here. And he was thinking, yo, this is another frivolous idea that she has. She's full of it, God. And the Spirit kept working on me. And a few days later, my husband said, I do believe this is where you're supposed to be. And 3 months later, we moved here. Wonderful. But I came here on a mission to tell Susie King Taylor's story fully. You cannot tell the story if you have not walked in her shoes. And I came here to walk on Gress Island. I came here to walk on the rice plantations. I came here to feel Susie King Taylor in a real way. And there are times when I feel like I am conjuring Susie King Taylor in a way that she speaks to me. And that's how Miss Rose and I and the committee got together. I stumbled upon the Midway First Presbyterian Cemetery seeking her slave mistress. And lo and behold, did I find out that I would never find her slave mistress at that cemetery, because as people are still segregated, they are segregated in death. I was at an African American cemetery, and she is located somewhere else, and I'm still trying to find her. But nevertheless, Susie King Taylor's family members are associated with Midway First Presbyterian Church at Midway Temple and Days Memorial, which are the historic churches, antecedents of Midway First Presbyterian Church. And it is out of that I began to conduct a tremendous amount of history, and I started to feel a kind of way, sorrow for slave children, because Susie was a girl. She was a young girl, and I am a mother, and there is this motherly instinct within me that says, I gotta find her children. I gotta find her son. I have to find these pieces of your life so that I can tell the story correctly. And in researching slave children, the lives of slave children, it was tough, it was hard, because slavery was itself indeed hard. But as I researched, they were children. They played games. They made stick games. They made balls out of cotton, and they were kids. And I said, Susie had to have been like that in some way. And with that, I proceeded to write a children's story based on her life, based on the information that she gives out of her own autobiography, collaborating and that with the research that I've done on slave children on the plantations throughout the Southeast. And with that, I came up with Happy Birthday, Susie, which is, we launched it on her 169th birthday.
And
on
when was her birthday?
August the 6th, 2017, she
Okay.
would have been 169 years old. And so we tell this story from a children's point of view, what she would have been doing on Grest Island, what she would have been doing in Savannah, what she would have been doing with the Bakers and the Quartermans and the Mallards. And Miss Rose, you can speak to these historic families as a genealogist. Susie King Taylor's story is couched in the history of Black Liberty County from colonial days until the present. And so I decided that, you know, we would produce this book in celebration of Susie King Taylor, and it is our hope that we can get this book into the local elementary schools, because this is the history of Liberty County. This is the history of Midway, Georgia. And Susie King Taylor was groomed and cultured by the African-American Gullah Geechee culture of Midway, Georgia in Liberty County.
It's beautifully illustrated.
Thank you so much.
This is beautiful. I know, guys, you can't see this book, but this is beautiful. This
Thank
is beautiful.
you.
And so you illustrated the book as well.
I did
You're an
illustrate.
artist
I am an artist as well.
Because it's colorful, it's bright, and on the cover of the book it has thank you in different languages.
Yes.
And so what caused you to do that?
It's very interesting. Susie King Taylor was a multilingual young girl. She spoke her native Gullah Geechee language, which is Africanized English. She also spoke English. She spoke German because her slave master was Swiss, and he spoke French, but his wife was German, and she spoke German. And the historical documents tell us that they spoke with heavy accents. And Susie King Taylor, being the vibrant young girl who, like a child, was absorbing all of this culture around her, there is no way that Susie King Taylor did not know German. She was walking around there talking about some Guten Tag, you know, and tanky and hello and thank
Merci.
you. Yes, merci beaucoup. So that is the multicultural, rich heritage that is in Midway that Susie King Taylor is a part of.
You know, Hermina, this book is not only for children.
Oh, yeah.
It's for adults as well.
Thank
It
you.
is rich in
Thank you.
history, information, culture. This is really beautiful.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank
Is
you so
it
much.
available?
It is available. Any of your listeners can go to ubuntustrategicconcepts.com. It's $15.99 plus shipping and handling, and it is available.
Listen, this book is 11 by 17 size.
Yes, it is.
For a little child and it's so colorful, a little child to read it by themselves, or parents can read to them.
Yes.
Absolutely. I wanted it to be engaging for any level of reader. And as you stated, it does have a tremendous amount of history in it, because Susie King Taylor, in her autobiography, she goes back 5 generations to one of her great-great-grandmothers being born in Africa. And so we take the story back to Africa, where the Gullah Geechee language is linked to the Kisi and the Gola people of West Africa. And so we link our tradition in East Liberty County all the way back to Africa, and until the present.
And so the Ubuntu. Now, how did the Ubuntu come about? I went to your website a couple of weeks ago, and I was fascinated of the number of things that you're involved in, not just being a historian, but how that actually bleeds into other areas.
Well, Ubuntu itself is an African concept that means I am because we are. And the work that I do, I want to live a life of purpose. I want to live a life of meaning. I want to live a life that glorifies God. And I want to live a life that is inspiring to young people. So Ubuntu emerged out of my historical work and my passion for environmental stewardship. And that is, how do we engage African Americans to appreciate the environment? God says the earth is His and the fullness thereof, and we are the stewards of everything. Yes. And so with that, Ubuntu emerged in about 3 or 4 years ago in terms of how do we get African Americans to engage the environment, to be stewards of the environment, and in addition to respect it and benefit from it in a way that others are doing. This ecotourism, we should be a part of that. Eco-heritage, we should be a part of that, particularly along the coast. And Ms. Rose can speak to about heirs' rights issues, property issues, because Ms. Rose's family themselves were property owners coming out of enslavement.
Tell me about that. Tell us about that, Rose.
Well, Miss Glass Hill says she remembers meeting me during that same contact you had with her, Miss Jones, and what she remembered most about it was I reminded her that the people in East Liberty County were, in fact, landowners. We were not sharecroppers. And there was this concept that they said came along from Sherman, with 40 acres and a mule, and almost everybody that you would find in the census for East Liberty County in the 1870s, 1880s, and the 1900s owned their property. We were property owners because in our neck of the woods, the slave masters allowed the enslaved people to be task workers. So you had tasks to do during the mornings. Once you were completed with your task, then you had the opportunity to go out and work on your own. They had their own little gardens. They were able to barter and trade. They were able to accumulate property, cows, chicken, pigs, horses. Some people even had a buggy. So when Sherman came through here, when General Kilpatrick came through on Sherman's march to the sea and confiscated a number of property that belonged to previously enslaved people, they were able to file claims against the federal government.
With the Southern Claims Commission.
With the Southern Claims Commission, and get reimbursed for the stuff that was taken from them. And it was in this area of Georgia that a lot of those claims were filed, not necessarily up toward the Atlanta area. So I always say we are landowners, and people here knows the value of property. And as we get older, I think land property through heirs ownership is beginning to roll over. And that is why it is important for us in the African American Heritage Trail to begin to educate our youth in the value of the land ownership, in the value of knowing their history, in the value of the stories their families told, so that they don't make the same mistake that others are making during this time.
Because the trend is that African Americans, we've lost a lot of land, coastal land especially. Excuse me. Coastal land especially because of encroachment, because of eminent domain, and just a trend of investors taking land
Exactly. They look at the tax book for unpaid taxes, and remember, for the most part, the coastal area was not necessarily where landowners wanted to be certain times of the year.
That's right.
It was because slaves could stay down here because we were, they thought, immune to malaria, typhoid fever, the kinds of things that mosquito bites would give to them, and they couldn't tolerate. They didn't want to live here, so the lands were abandoned. And then all of a sudden, it became very popular and politically correct to have waterfront property. So everybody was looking for waterfront property, even what is now we would have considered to be swampland. And if you had a piece of that, then of course it was valuable, but it wasn't valuable enough to purchase it from you. It was valuable enough to increase the taxes on it, and therefore put you
That's
in a
right.
position to not be able to afford it, and then be able for someone else to take it through paying the taxes on it.
That's right. That's right.
And so you mentioned the African American History Trail.
Heritage Trail.
Heritage
yes.
Trail.
Yes.
So tell me about that organization, when it got started. How did it get started? I know you told us why. So share a bit about that.
Well, a group of us met. One of the things that has helped us, well, one of the things that has inspired us is the enthusiasm of Hermina. She is one enthusiastic person.
Thank you,
I'm
Ms. Rose.
I'm a history buff, and I love genealogy, but boy, does she have some energy. But when she came in and did the Susie Taylor birthday party, Susie King Taylor birthday party presentation, we thought about how much our youth in this community does not appreciate our history. Down here, people says if you tease somebody who live up in the inner part of the state and the inner part of the county, and said, "Oh, are you one of them Geechees?" No, I'm not a Geechee. There's nothing embarrassing about being a Geechee.
That's right.
Absolutely nothing. We need to salute and celebrate it. And I call myself bilingual because
right.
I can speak the Gullah Geechee language.
Get down, Ms.
but
Rose.
I can also talk the King's English.
That's right.
Yes.
I can talk it, I can write it,
Yes.
and you wouldn't even know. Sometime in a conversation, people ask me, where did I come from? I say, from the South. I don't have the drawl. I can do whatever I want to do. So I am bilingual. So Gullah Geechee is a good historical point for our kids to embrace.
Yes.
And the stories that have happened here, we need to be telling it and passing it on.
That's correct. That's right, because Congress has recognized the Gullah Geechee Cultural Heritage Corridor, which begins from North Carolina through South Carolina, Georgia, and North Florida, 30 miles inward all the way down. And even the United Nations has recognized Gullah Geechee as a language, as a world language. And I think that if these entities, these superpowers, if you will,
Yes.
can recognize this and capitalize on our history, then we, of course, need to embrace what is ours.
Yes.
And so with that, we have linked ourselves with Gullah Geechee heritage programs and organizations throughout the Southeast. And we're really excited. On our Ancestor Grave Decoration Day, we had speakers from Washington, D.C. We had people from Charleston, from Savannah. We had performers who were the saltwater Gullah Geechee performers. And we are slowly embracing this. And so this heritage trail is building upon the culture that has already existed for the last 300 years in Liberty County. And so we're really excited about where God is going to is taking us really with this trail, because we are appearing as leaders in this movement of celebrating and acknowledging Gullah Geechee culture in Liberty County.
So now the African American History trail. The board it directs the activities and the direction of what you're going to do in the area.
Yes, yes. We have 4 areas that we are, what are the areas, Ms. Rose?
We are working on preservation, restoration, education, and
Stewardship.
Stewardship.
Yes.
Yes. So we have a lot. We look in our community now. Sometimes we drive around and we see the dilapidation and the crumbling of what should be points of interest that we should be restoring and labeling, making sure that we are identifying that. And because of that, we know that we need to do something before we lose all of this. And as we get older, the people who come here don't know anything about this history here. The younger people who've been here can't tell you anything about the history either. So people go around doing the same thing again that has already been done, and all they need to do is take the script and the pattern from what was previously done and then be able to move on to do something bigger and better. So we are working hard to identify sites of historical benefit for the African American community. Hermina is working on Susie King Taylor, but within our community there are others that are not as full-blown as Susie King, but people who here, by the sweat of their brows, their hands, have been able to accomplish things that would be unbelievable without the electronic support that we have now. So we are passionate about doing those things, and we are passionate about the education and getting our children and our community on board.
And it's been so great to work with Miss Rose and the rest of the team, Reverend Dr. El Shayer and Willie Mae Washington, because it's to be welcomed into this community to do this work has been really great, and we work together. The synergy is really great. Our focus and our passions are really inspiring, and what is coming out of this is incredible, meaningful spiritual work that needs to be done. It's particularly in regards to cemeteries and how we reverence our ancestors. And I want to just thank Ms. Rose for being, she's sort of like my spiritual mother. She leads and guides me and tell me when I'm acting up.
That's good.
And, yeah.
You need somebody to tell you when you acting up.
Oh, yeah.
I run her to bed at night, too.
Yes, she does. She really does. Because she's such a wealth, she has such a wealth of information. And being a Binya and knowing everything and everybody and all of the names and all of the locations. I mean, every Monday, they take me to a site, to a historic site. And my background is cultural heritage preservation. And so we look at the sites, we assess the sites, and we determine if this indeed is going to be part of our trail. We'll have several different types of trails. Expect in early 2018 our brochure to be available, our website to be available.
Wonderful.
And we're really excited about what's becoming of East Liberty County.
Well, Rose Mullice herself is a legend in this area.
Yes.
She's modest.
Yes.
But Rose Mullice is a household name. Many
I
people
believe it.
know Rose Mullice. And the work you've done in counseling and mentoring professional counselors. You have a record of a number, I know them, of professional counselors that you've mentored. They've become licensed. And so you're a legacy, leaving a legacy. And, and even in our sorority, you've just been a wonderful, powerful woman in the community. And so, I want to appreciate that it's a privilege to have you here on the show today now.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. But now my mission is to tell the story.
Yes, tell the story.
As long as I'm, my mantra is a African proverb that says, as long as you speak my name, I will live forever.
That's
So
right.
we are speaking the names
Yes.
of those who have gone on before us so that they can live forever. I'm reminded that, and I haven't shared this with anyone, my mother used to play a little game with me, and it was a little 10-finger game. This little piggy went to town.
Oh, yeah, I
and
remember that.
we played that, and the final little finger on the hand says, we, I want some too. Well, her mother taught that to her. She taught it to me. I taught it to my children. They taught it to my grandchildren. And then we taught it to my great-grandchildren. My grandmother has been dead since 1936. So, and every time we play that game, we speak her name.
Yes.
And she still lives.
Yes.
Yes, I love that. I
Yes.
love that because
Yes.
it speaks to what history does.
Yes.
When we're telling the story, it causes it to live on.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yes.
And the next thing that's up, because you've had the decoration event. We were out of town, but tell me about that. I want to know more about how that came about.
The Ancestor Grave Decoration Day came about in me seeking to find relatives of Susie King Taylor. And as we were walking the grounds of the cemetery, we realized we capitalized upon the holiday, the frivolity of Halloween, and we decided that let's do something educational and historical that's meaningful for our people. And as we walked the grounds, we came up with, let's do what our ancestors did. We were talking in the car, Miss Rose and I, we were talking about Cyrus Bowen, who was a minister in the 1930s, Miss Rose?
Yes.
He was a minister in Sunbury in the 1930s, but he was also a folk artist, and his work is acknowledged in one of the premier museums in the country. He decorated headstones with all kinds of pipes and stones and dolphin bones, and it's
Wooden
a folk
carving.
Yeah, and it's a
Wooden
folk
carvings.
art that is absolutely incredible, and it speaks to our heritage across the sea, around the Atlantic world, the Atlantic basin. And we decided that in calling these names, we would also call forth these old traditions, these African ways of burying and decorating graves and putting grave offerings or grave goods.
Yes.
Because the idea is that you would allow them to enter into the spirit world safely by putting things that they treasured or that bespoke of their personality. And so with that, we decided that this was an event that was worthy of having the community come out. I think we had about 60 community participants to come out and decorate their ancestors' grave, many of whom had not been to the cemetery in 30, 40 years. And so it is about community building. It's about sharing those stories. It's about us honoring us and celebrating us. And it was a tremendous event. Don't you think, Ms. Rose?
It was. In fact, the people became so excited about it. We had originally decided that we would give them a week to put the decoration out, and then a week later they would have to take it down. Well, they got so elaborate with that decoration and got so excited about it until we said, we're just going to leave those things there until the flowers die away, and then we have to then clean up the graves. And then, because it is attributable to Memorial Day, we did it in October because we were trying to get our board off the ground and do an activity. And so we decided that we would do it for Halloween this year, but next year we have already confirmed the date for the 28th of May, and we will do it on the actual decoration day,
Memorial Day.
which is Memorial Day. Came about because newly freed slaves dug up the bodies of Union soldiers and reinterred them in the ground with a proper burial in Charleston, South Carolina.
That's
Which
right.
is
That
a
was the
little known
first.
fact.
Exactly. That was the first Memorial Day.
And they had over 10,000 African Americans and white Americans who joined in that celebration in May of 1865. And it was an incredible celebration, but it was a tradition that African Americans, especially Gullah Geechee along the coast, had already been doing. So we're just reinstituting and reinvigorating this tradition that African Americans started.
And we need to value, and to me, it speaks to me about valuing our history, valuing the legacy of people in our families, and valuing families. And sometimes I think we've lost that because of distance, because of being too busy, that we're not staying in connection with our families and our heritage.
That's true. I had the opportunity to go to the historic cemetery event with Fort Stewart does every year with families. And it was an awesome event, but I began to notice it was a diverse group of individuals on the tour, on the bus. But as we entered into Fort Stewart and went to these various cemeteries, Salem, Moody Cemetery, as well as Jerusalem, an African American cemetery, as a historian, I'm an oral historian in particular, and I observed what people were saying, and I observed their body language and their expressions, and many were happy, but a great majority of them, you could read their body language in terms of the disconnection with the history. They were sad at what took place in the 1940s. They were essentially displaced. They were dismembered. And so when I got back home to process the event, I subscribe professionally to this idea of root shock. They had experienced root shock in returning back to their old homes, Willie, Georgia, and Pleasant Grove, and trying to understand and process, because those generational stories, they're in us. I remember stories of, just being plain old poor in the ghetto in Atlanta, and I remember those stories, but I also remember those happy times in my family. Those people were remembering the stories of their ancestors, and some of them, many of them, were sad. And they were experiencing root shock. I could see it. And, we didn't get nearly as much money as we should have gotten, from the property.
Wow.
Those stories went on.
Wow.
So it was a very interesting. So the idea of these communities coming back together, I think that coming back together helps them to remember, but we also need to go a step further and assuaging the pain that comes with, that's associated with that.
Well, we'll have to continue this in part 2. We're going to have to leave it at that for today's
Thank you for having
show.
us.
Thank you so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. Guys, I've been talking to Hermina Glass-Hill, who's a local historian, oral historian, also Rose Mullice, who's a genealogist and a retired social worker in our area. We've had a dynamic conversation about African American and Gullah history in the community. We've got to come back and do part 2 because
Yes.
I know you've missed a lot, and we have so much that we can talk about. Will you come back?
Oh, yes, we certainly will come back. We'd love to.
Great. Thank you
Yes.
for listening to Conversations with Daisy Jones. And remember, in these times of evolving technology, so much social media, remember that a good conversation is still the most powerful communication on the planet. So season your words with grace. We'll talk next time. Make it a great day. God bless you.
Mother, there's too many of you crying. Brother, there's far too many of you dying. You know we've gotta find a way to bring some living here today. So what's going on? What's going on? Let's talk about what's going on. What's going on? What's going on? All around us. What's going on? 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 Let's talk about what's going on. Hey, conversations with Daisy Jones. What's going on?